Yes, it was probably the most cut and dry. He didn't really give out too much information in this press
No.
conference. It was Tuesday at 1:43 PM is when it
He
began.
was late. What is that about?
Someone
Travel
was late. We don't know
delays.
if it was him.
That's
Someone
true.
was late. He also was coming with a massive entourage. He shouted out each and every one of them.
Maybe that was it.
He had 3 kids. His wife was there. I would expect that. But then, like, it seemed like his in-laws may have been there or his in-laws
They
were
weren't I
watching
think yeah, they weren't there, but he had, like, a ton of immediate family.
and his pastor was there.
Yeah, there were a lot of, Chesney supporters there, which I thought was fun, but I did crack up with travel delays causing a 15-minute delay when it's like, "You're in Harrisonburg, we you run into traffic? Like, what do you mean there's a travel delay?"
The delay was getting from Worcester, Massachusetts to James Madison at the Shenandoah Regional Airport.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's the only thing. But was there anything that really stood out to you? We'll get into news or snooze kind of quicker than normal with this one, but just general takeaways from the opening press conference.
None for me. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, we're gonna go. We're gonna do it.
I I think I think he's obviously very well spoken. I thought that he's super engaging, and I think that will hold some value. I think fans are kind of taking away from what Kurt Signetti was a little bit more than they need to with some of their takes. Were like, "Oh my god, this guy can form a sentence." It's like Signetti was not like an idiot who like couldn't speak. He was maybe a little bit more awkward than Chesney and like less polished, but he was pretty good, especially toward the end with the media. Like the McAfee stuff was great, right? The stuff after like blowouts over Coastal, I thought were phenomenal for the most part. Pretty good with the media, but the Chesney I think seems a little more polished, and I think he'll probably get along well with the media. I think he will get along well with donors, get along well with fans. He'll probably make more of an effort. I think what he had an event at O'Neill's Grill tonight. Um, I don't know that Signetti ever did anything like that, like a meet and greet kind of thing. So I think he's going to be a little bit more engaged in the community, which is a positive. But at the end of the day, fans are going to say right now they really care about that. It all comes down, like how he'll be viewed is all going to come down to on-field results, like it is with every coach, which is why fans love Signetti, even though they claim not to after the fact.
I didn't know you were a Signetti apologist.
I just found some of the comments so funny from fans where they're like, "Gosh, finally a guy who can like engage with people." It's like 3 weeks ago, Signetti goes on the McAfee show and we're like, "This is peak content. Like this is unbelievable." And now we're like, he can't even do media. What?
Yeah, he would have some. He was just weird. Signetti was just a very. He
Yes.
didn't let the media in at all. Like practices were like open for a 10-minute frame, and it was very manufactured on who you could talk to and when you could talk to. He was very standoffish about his quarterback situation in fall camp. So there was just a lot of. I think he made it harder on himself, but also his opening press conference was funny when he was like, "Should I tell him about the pig story?" And we were all like, this guy's a regular dude. Where I
Well,
think Chesney is very calculated in what he says. He's a fantastic dude. From this press conference makes me want to run through a wall for him. I thought it was exactly what was needed. And like you said, I think he's going to fundraise at an exceptionally high clip. I think he's going to do something that, not a lot of coaches have necessarily done in the past few years, whether it's Withers, Houston, or Signetti. I think Chesney has a real chance to go out there, really become part of the community for his 48 months in Harrisonburg, 24 months in Harrisonburg, and really start to build a good foundation fundraising wise, because that's something we've kind of been missing out from coaches. We haven't necessarily seen them, kiss the baby, shake the hands of politicians, and get 10,000, 15, 20, $50,000 donations secured from whether it's alumni or just people in the Harrisonburg area.
I like that. I think he'll be good at that. He's certainly engaging. I don't think he's gonna like come into a post game press conference and be like, huh, Jordan McLeod missed 8 reads tonight. Can you
He
imagine how many like
he's not gonna say Alonzo Barnett got the yips.
right?
Which
So
Signetti was just some of his post game, like Signetti was a different type of like they are just
yeah.
the polar opposites. Signetti literally said it's like when a golfer can't go through his backswing. That's what was happening to Alonzo out there. And it's like, Jesus, man.
Which at the same time, as a fan and like someone like covering the team, sort of, was valuable. Like, it's the candid, like, honest feedback was great. So that's the part where I sort of push back. They're different, but I don't think it's one is better, or yeah, Worcester. But I don't think they're better or
Worcester. It's
worse.
Worcester,
Yeah, if you're from Boston. I think
not Worcester. My bad. Sorry
I
about that.
think like, I don't think he's necessarily better or worse than Signetti. I think there's some things that he does that'll be really positive compared to Signetti. But again, he's following up a 52-9 5-year stretch, an 11-1 season this year, where, like, if they were eligible, maybe they're playing in a New Year's Six bowl, or at least close to it. So I don't know. I'm excited for the Chesney era. I also think he's filling some big shoes.
He's filling some massive shoes. I mean, since Houston took over, Withers era like was extremely massive in the impact it made on JMU, but like the wins and losses and postseason success weren't necessarily there.
Right.
But since Houston has taken over, he has massive, massive shoes to fill. And like, I think he's going to succeed. I think he's going to be a fantastic coach. But like, this is a really tough situation to come into. He mentioned it in the press conference. I'm not here to tear it down and rebuild it. I'm here to keep this momentum going and hopefully build on that momentum. You tell me, is that a harder spot to be in? Because if you lose 3 games this season, it's a failure.
Yeah, I think it's way harder than, like, his previous jobs where he had time to rebuild. At the
Even
same
Syracuse, like if he had gone to Syracuse,
Yes,
he would have had
it's a
years to.
rebuild.
He didn't get hired there, but like he was in that running, one of the finalists. Like that is a much different job than what this job is.
I think for the plus side for him, if he can keep the momentum rolling, dude's at a Power 5 spot probably, right, in 2 or 3 years. So it's an exciting spot for him, and I'm excited to see how he keeps it rolling, in terms of, like, recruiting and the portal and things like that. He didn't get into a lot of his, like, philosophies in the press conference when it comes to recruiting or the portal or stuff like that. But it's going to be fascinating to see because, yeah, my expectations for year one of Bob Chesney depend a lot on what the roster looks like.
Yeah.
But I think, kind of like you're saying, based on some of the guys they're expected to return, based on what they can do in the portal and some of the guys in the recruiting class, if they can keep them, and the schedule, I mean, any like 8-4 is going to be feeling pretty frustrating for fans if that's what you get. I think it's got to be 9-3 or better to have people pleased, and even then, 9-3 might have a few fans kind of like grumbling.
Yeah, and I mean, on the offensive side, they're not losing necessarily a ton. I might be underselling that a bit. Kalon Black just went into the portal. You have Jordan McLeod in the portal, but you're keeping a lot of those. Zach Horton's in the portal. Okay, so you're
There
losing a
were a
good amount.
couple linemen too that are, well, three. They got 3 good ones in there now.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, you are losing a good bit. I completely forgot about the lineman and that Zach Horton was in there, so I retract what I was saying. But like, you still have Elijah Surratt, you still have a good running wide receiver with him, and I would assume you're bringing in a running back. And
Yeah.
as long as your offensive line can run block, your running back should be fine. This year, the offensive line kind of struggled with run blocking at times, which is why Kalon and Tyson and Latrell weren't necessarily the best back there. But you're overall pretty fine on offense, where if you can bring in the right transfer quarterback, and that's a massive if, but if you can do that, you shouldn't have any drop off whatsoever on the offensive side. It'll also be really interesting, and we'll get into it in a little bit, about who he's bringing in coordinator wise, who
Mhm.
we might expect him to bring in, how he's going to build out this staff. Those are going to be some really key hires. The defensive side, you don't need a world beating off defense on the defensive side to win the Sun Belt.
And I think they could have a pretty good. They should be good on both sides. Like, they, even with some of these portal guys, they have some really good players who are expected to return next year. I don't know. There's
D'Angelo
a
Pons, Jacob
Pon,
Thomas,
Pons on
Trent
defense.
Hendrick,
Yep.
Tyreek Tucker, Amar Thomas, Emmanuel Bush.
Hmm. And even offensively, there's a lot of skill guys who are pretty good. I think Surratt, Hudson, Maxwell Moss, Ymir Knight, Cole Potts on the offensive line. You got Aaron Gunn, who backed him up. Josh Toner is not in the portal. I don't think Tanner Morris is.
Wayne Knight is in the portal, though.
Wait, that's Wayne Knight is in the portal. That's correct. So, like, there's a lot of ability there before you've even tried to add guys in the portal. Indiana went out and got Ohio's starting quarterback. So I don't know what that means for Jordan McLeod, but probably not going to Indiana. Um, interesting.
The leaves a little bit too much. So earlier today, Bob Chesney was on 106.7 The Fan up in Washington, D.C. Maybe I was reading the tea leaves way too much, but he made it sound like that he's trying to get Jordan McLeod to stay.
I could see him making a push for that. And if he doesn't get that, maybe tries to get Sluka or someone else in the portal. But yeah, I think McLeod coming back is definitely a possibility for the Dukes. So I don't know. They should have a really good team next year.
So what are your expectations for Chesney? Because you kind of avoided the question with his first year. Overall, what are your expectations for him from when he coaches his first game to when he coaches his last?
Yeah. To be honest with you, my expectations are that they can post a 9 or more win season in all of his years.
Yeah, my expectation is that whatever school hires him next, they can post a quarterback graphic using JMU quarterbacks.
Pretty normal stuff. I think it's realistic though that they could contend in year 1. I don't know if it's my expectation, but contend to make the college football playoff as the group of 5 team in year 1. So just to stress that, like, I'm not giving him any buffer in terms of like expectations or goals because he's talked right wanting to accelerate the program.
Yeah.
The only real acceleration from this year is like undefeated or a Sun Belt championship, obviously, where you're playing the game, but then also like making a New Year's Six college football playoff kind of event, and that's doable.
Yeah, I think in his career, a college football playoff it depends on how long he's here, but like
Sure.
within the next 3 years, I expect a college football playoff berth. You were on the cusp of it this year. In theory, you're not like you should be able to. We don't rebuild, we retool, whatever that cliche is that teams
Uh,
use. You should be able to retool. Some of the stuff that's happening with the transfer portal and recruiting class, I feel like he's sitting on his hands a little bit too much right now. But if he can figure that, if he hits a couple home runs, if he hits a couple of doubles, all of a sudden this team is completely reloaded, and you're looking at another Sun Belt championship, Sun Belt East winner. And I think if you win the Sun Belt, especially through the Sun Belt East with only one, maybe one loss, you're a shoe-in for that group of 5 spot in the college football playoff. I expect this team to be contending for Sun Belt East titles and Sun Belt championships every year that he is here. So very much like you, I don't expect to fall off. If this team
mm-mm.
starts 1-3, that's a failure.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of pressure, but I think that's kind of fair. Should we talk a little recruiting and portal? You mentioned sort of, I guess, quote unquote, sitting on his hands a little bit. So he went on the DC radio station 106.7 The Fan. He said that for guys who are in the portal, he would like to hear back soon after. I think he said right after
He
the
did.
bowl game on the 23rd. Um, I don't know what exactly that means, right? I don't know that he's going to be like blowing up their phones on Christmas Day, being like,
Well, no, I think what it means is the second that game, the whistle blows final, he's going to be in the locker room and he's going to go, yes or no, as they're coming in.
"Are you with us or against us?" He's it's going to be an interesting process with that because that's still like 10 days away to know like how many scholarships you're playing with.
Yeah.
I thought he would have wanted an answer before the bowl game.
Yeah. Also, why did Kamara and Carter Miller decide not to play?
My expectation would be that they're like very much transferring and are like, I don't want any injury risk
Okay,
for a
that's
game
fair.
that I guess to them doesn't mean that much, maybe. Um,
But
I
okay,
don't
yeah,
know.
back to the transfer. Yeah, I think he seems to be moving very methodically. Is that the word you
I
use?
think, yeah,
Deliberately.
deliberate. Yeah.
Everything that he's doing is everything's taking a little longer than me as a fan. I'll put on my fan hat right now. Me as a fan really want. Like I wanted him to be hired and have the press conference on Friday. Instead, it was until Tuesday. I wanted him to be, announcing transfer after transfer. I wanted us to be announcing that we're bringing in Kyle McCord yesterday. And so it feels like there's like no forward momentum. Like recruits and transfers weren't on campus to visit until like today or tomorrow. I felt
Yeah.
like that should have been happening over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. Like it feels all like we're behind 48 hours. And even felt like that during the hiring process. But again, that is me talking with my fan hat on where I want everything immediately.
Hard to see too, and hard to fully piece it all together, but obviously there's a little bit of a process. And I think maybe the high level P5s are a little more active early and they're getting the big NIL kids and they sign some and you can get some good players after that. But definitely a difference if you see like the way Kurt Signetti and his staff are tweeting right now. It's like, we got another one. And then they announce recruits and transfers. And it's like, okay. What do
Whoa.
we have? So it's a difference, especially from last year. I was looking at some of the dates when people committed. McLeod committed in like November.
Yeah, he didn't. He
Because
didn't. He was
yeah,
already off the team. He was.
he
He
didn't
was a
really
different
count.
case.
But like Surratt committed December 18th, right? So that'd be 4 days from now as a transfer commit. So it's interesting. We'll see if they start to get some transfers coming in. And I wonder how many guys he thinks he can get out of the portal because there's a lot of really good players in the portal. I wonder if he's like, hey, if I have some time with them, if I can be involved in some practices and they like what they see and they realize that maybe the NIL money, because for some of the players, I don't think the NIL is going to be quite what they expected. Sometimes they're like, oh, I can get 6 figures. And then you go in and you're not getting 6 figures.
Yeah,
Then you could want to come back. I wonder if he's like, hey, I think I can get 5+ back.
I would hope so because looking at kind of who's been offered where, and I don't mean this as a slight with what I'm about to say, but it seems like Chauncey Logan is a candidate to potentially come back. It seems like Aiden Fisher is a candidate to potentially come back. Jordan McLeod is a candidate to potentially come
Yeah.
back. And that's 3 huge names. Zach Horton, James Carpenter, they seem like, I don't know them personally, but they seem like JMU through and through and like would like to stay. But again, they might have NIL bags waiting for them. But I also don't know how big NIL bags are for a tight end and a defensive tackle. But
Mhm.
I would not be shocked if Chauncey Logan, Aiden Fisher, and Jordan McLeod all return.
Yeah, I think Logan had posted that he got offered by South Florida, as did Brent Austin. Um, gonna draw. I'll look it up to make sure I have it right. But South Florida offered, and then I think New Mexico with Bronco Mendenhall offered Chauncey Logan. That's a full-on rebuild in New Mexico. I don't know. I don't know that that would necessarily sway him. So I think there's a possibility that they could can convince some of those guys to come back depending on their offers. So yeah, I think that'll be super interesting to keep an eye on. Matt Burkett, I want to make sure I have the name right. Cornerbacks coach, believe he was at JMU previously. Yeah, he was. So he was on JMU's defense. He is at South Florida and offered Austin and Logan. So there's some familiarity with him.
Yeah.
So maybe that's would sway him to go down there. I mean, kind of fun to play football at South Florida, but I think JMU is sort of in that same realm and probably has a better team right now. So if you can get some of those guys, then it becomes a little less obvious or necessary, right, to add other players from other colleges in the portal or whatever, because you're just returning like clear starters. So maybe he thinks that that's part of it is like, hey, I'm recruiting like people on campus right now.
Yeah, I think that could be very well it. And who knows how it's all gonna shake out because if all of a sudden he brings back 50% of who's in the portal, I think we
Yeah.
have a very different tone of how he's handling it all. We don't know what's happening behind closed doors. He says he's staying up late and is just like grinding away, and he kind of strikes me as a grinder, so that doesn't shock me.
He also kind of seems like
Sean McVay, I agree.
he has Sean McVay vibes, but in the way that like Signetti and Sunseri and those other coaches are like building hype around Indiana, I think he kind of realizes like that's completely unnecessary for like where JMU is. And he's just like quietly working. Like, cause he had transfers and like recruits on campus today and had said nothing until the interview of like, yeah, we got people on campus today. And like, he hasn't said anything about his staff. I feel very confident over the last week he has put staff stuff together and just
Yeah,
not said anything publicly. So I do think there's going to be this period at some point in the next month
where we're
where
just gonna
they
get like
start.
a
It's going to,
deluge of just this guy, this guy, this guy, this transfer, this transfer, this we got Matthew Sluka, and that's like buried in just news.
yes, I think he's just going to be like staff, player, 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 and everyone's gonna be like, "What the heck?" Well, I think when it comes, I think it's going to come in like a rush, and then going into the spring, I think fans are going to have like full on Bob Chesney is a god kind of hype. Like I think he's going to piece it together like quietly,
Yeah.
and then when it's announced, it's got a chance to be pretty interesting and special. I think.
All right, I love it.